Okay, hope you all got your energy recharged, and we are going to continue our discussions and debates and thought-provoking exchanges. But first of all, one technical announcement. Who lost your telephone on one of the tables at the lunch? Please just come here, because someone forget the phone, and just to flag that it is here. And thankfully not pagers, just the phone. Hopefully it will be not ringing now. Will not spoil our panel. Okay, so we've. My name is Dmitro Shulga from International Renaissance Foundation, which is the Open Society Foundation in Ukraine. I'm privileged to be moderator of what I hope will be very interesting exchange of the experts from member states, from candidates, and hopefully we will have some time to interact with the audience as well, of course. We have already heard a lot about geopolitical considerations of the enlargement, about security considerations, hybrid threats, all sort of things associated with our accession, future accession to the European Union. But it's no secret that for many people, actually, the European Union is first of all about internal market, it's about rules of competition, it's about structural funds. Basically, it's about money. And we already heard quite a lot of references to these issues, like these realities, when we have these geopolitical debates, like strategic debates of high-level experts and sometimes politicians, and then coming back to this reality at home, first of all, in many member states, like, okay, but what does it cost? All those political decisions, they cost money. All those security decisions, they cost money. Enlargement, obviously, will cost some money. And when we talk about the common pie of the EU budget, it will cost some money for the EU budget. What are the costs? What are the benefits? Obviously, there must be some benefits as well, and there are. And now I think we will have a great opportunity to hear from the colleagues who represent various organizations and countries. And I suggest to start with, and actually to continue with it. I mean, I just thought in which order, and I suggest Arturo would be speaking first, as we know that EU started from the European Community Treaty signed in Rome. So Italy was first in the rank of member states. So please, Arturo, take your floor and share with us your points about your thinking, your estimations of the costs and benefits. And just in order to, again, just to repeat to everyone, for all the speakers, just for the sake of being strict on time, we have 5 minutes for the introductory speeches. Hopefully we'll have discussions with the audience, and that means that if we are strict on time in 5 minutes, then we will have opportunity to speak again for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and happy for this Italy first policy. So, but more happy to be here with you. So thank you very much for inviting me. Talking about Italy, Italy has maintained a welcoming stance towards EU enlargement, despite a lot of problems that was already mentioned by my colleague Nona Michelidze, and we'll try to focus very briefly on the cost. So two points on this. The first is that Italy is a net contributor to the EU budget and will inevitably face increased financial responsibilities in case of an enlargement to new member countries. Second point, Italy is a part of the common agricultural policy. I think that is one of the main problems, and this policy allocates significant resources to support European farmers, especially in the case of new accessions. And as EU net contributor, Italy could see its financial obligation increase to help to integrate in the agricultural sector of country like Ukraine. Italian farmers, to be frank, are always very keen for their benefit to be maintained, and this government, the Meloni government in particular, is sensitive to their demands. But that said, Italy's concern about the financial burden are moderate, relatively moderate, I think, especially compared to the other EU members. Because as a country that has benefited from the European integration, Italy, and in cooperation with other countries, Italy views the potential cost of enlargement as a sort of long-term investment. So we have to change the narrative in some way. The expansion of the EU offers advantage that could offset this short-term cost. Yeah, we have talked about the geopolitical cost, but also in financial and economic terms, this is a reality, this is true. So the new countries coming to the EU would open new markets and straighten all the European markets in some way. So the cost, we have to talk about also the cost of non-enlargement, no? Because the cost of non-enlargement must therefore also be taken into consideration, into account. And the Italian government generally know that these would be very high cost, again, in terms of geoeconomic reason and in terms of economic, geopolitical reason and economic reason. So despite these concerns, I think Italy view enlargement as an essential for Europe's future. The geopolitical advantage of having Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans, because also for Italy is important, the Western Balkans, in EU far outweigh the short-term financial implication, I think. And this accession by Ukraine in particular should be coupled, in my opinion, in my view, with a narrative on the reconstruction of Ukraine. And the role that you and the European countries, European members could have in the reconstruction. So having Ukraine inside is not only a cost, but is a double benefit. Geopolitical benefit, economical benefit, because the Italian business community, but the European community more in general, could see this accession as an opportunity, as an economic opportunity. As an Italian, I must mention the role of Mario Draghi in particular in introducing into the European political debate the need to have Ukraine in the EU as soon as possible. So in Draghi's recent report to the European Commission, he emphasized the strategic importance of EU enlargement. Draghi argued that the expansion is critical for strengthening Europe's global standing and security. He also highlighted the need for careful financial planning, to manage the cost of the enlargement. But Draghi stressed that the enlargement would ensure the EU's resilience in facing external pressure, external threats from global power like Russia, but also China. In conclusion, very briefly, I think that while enlargement will no doubt increase financial pressure on Italy and the other EU members country, the long-term benefit of a more stable, secure, and integrated Europe far surpasses the cost. And economic well-being will be a common advantage also for the economy of the member countries and for Italy for sure. So I think Italy remains committed to support this process. More talking about the political line of the Italian governments, Meloni or not Meloni, I think. And Italy is recognizing that investment we make today will ensure a stronger, more united Europe in the years to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Now, Robert from Berlin Economics from German Economic Team of Advisors to Ukraine. Please, floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I have to admit that when I was reading the panel description, when you sent me the invitation, I found it a bit too narrow because it stressed or focused on the costs, on the price of, to the budget. And it's clear that it is a very political and important question, right? At the end of the day, it's about money, and that has a lot of resistance. But, I mean, it doesn't really capture the essence of EU integration, right? Because it doesn't talk about the benefits. And if we wouldn't have the benefits, we wouldn't talk about the costs, right? And we have been working in Ukraine for many, many years on the economic integration policies, directions of Ukraine, using different economic models, and there was always a very clear case that EU integration is, from an economic point of view, beneficial for Ukraine. More beneficial than other integration options that had been discussed from time to time. I remember that many, many years back, people in Ukraine wanted to join the customs union with Russia, right? Fortunately, this is not on the table anymore, but still it was there, and we had to analyze it. And it was always clear that the European angle is much more beneficial for Ukraine, not just for Ukraine, also for the European side. This is sometimes forgotten. It's a win-win. Integration is, from an economic point of view, a win-win situation. Obviously, the advantages are more, in relative terms, more on the Ukrainian side because it's smaller, but also Europe benefits from this, right? This is always important when we talk here about cost and price. Europe also benefits economically from an integration of Ukraine. And that this topic has been floating around. I think it has to do with certain studies that had been done last year, or this year, quoting like 136 billion, I think that went up to 186 billion euro of transfers to Ukraine in case the current setup of rules would be applied to a new member of Ukraine, right? But for me, this, yeah, it is an extrapolation. I don't put too much emphasis on it because, again, current rules will probably have to be changed. We don't know who will join, apart from Ukraine, maybe also Moldova, maybe other countries. The whole recovery reconstruction agenda is not in these figures as well, and this is actually what we are faced day to day in Ukraine with huge additional costs. So I tend to discard these numbers. I think what is clear is Ukraine will be a net beneficiary, right? This is obvious with the GDP, with the agriculture sector, and so on. But how much and how, I think this is very much subject to discussion. Also on the European side, I said there were huge economic benefits associated with, so I would also go further here. An EU accession of Ukraine would also have implications on EU fiscal situation in a positive way, because there are companies doing business here, investing, people working here, which pay taxes there. So all this would also have a positive impact on the European side. What are next steps? I would say we should really see where we are in terms of the association agreement, right, which has been already applied and is economically bringing Ukraine very closer to the EU, but still there are measures that could be taken in the meantime also to improve integration, to increase integration. There are also measures that should not be taken. I'm referring here to the blockades that have been really very, very bad, again, for both sides, not just damaging Ukraine in a war, which I would say is a step in the back economically, but also the European economy, because we're actually exporting more to Ukraine than we're importing, so it was a lose-lose situation. Then also the embargoes on certain agricultural products. All this is, in my view, absolutely pointless and should not be done. And then there are two more measures, and one has been taken. That's the autonomous trade measures that had been temporarily suspended after the war, then rolled over so far till 25. I think June 25 is the time where Ukraine still can export without duties to the EU. This is good. That brings additional exports, we calculated about $3 billion on export revenue for Ukraine, which is important in the current situation. But it's a temporary measure, right? And the problem with temporary measures is always that investors, they don't really take it as a signal to invest, because if you know that something is only for next year, you don't take long-term decisions with investment, right? And a second measure, which I think is more relevant here, deeper integration, would be in the TBT, technical barriers to trade, and SPS, so sanitary and phytosanitary measures, that these will be removed. We also did calculations there that as a result of this, bilateral trade, EU-Ukraine could be increased by $11 billion US, 2/3 of this on the export side of Ukraine, so very beneficial again, and also more than $1 billion of tax revenue could be generated. So these are medium-term measures which, in parallel to the EU negotiations, should be conducted in order to improve the economic performance, the resilience of Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Now, Wojciech, your 5 minutes, please.
Thank you also for Aliona and her whole New York team for having me today. No doubt that Ukrainian accession will be the most challenging since 2004 Big Bang enlargement, when 10 Central European mostly countries joined. I have 3 quick points which I would like to stop for a while. First, some numbers. When Ukraine joined the EU, it will be the biggest enlargement, the accession of the biggest country in Europe just after France. It will be also an accession of the poorest European country, which will obviously impact the EU budget. And think about those numbers. Ukraine's GDP per capita before the invasion was around 20% lower than Bulgaria's GDP when Bulgaria joined the EU in 2007. If we compare GDP of 8 Central European countries who joined the EU in 2004, their then GDP was at the level of 40, at least around 40% of the so-called old members of the EU. So obviously, this is the first challenge. The second point, the EU is definitely not only about money, but whether we like it or not, there is a perception from the societies and political elite that EU is also about money. So let's try to very quickly think about what Ukraine as an EU member would mean for the community. So around 20% of Ukrainian agricultural land are Ukrainian land. So as a consequence, Ukrainian being a EU member will become the largest beneficiary from the common agricultural policy. Ukraine low GDP would mean that the country will also become the biggest recipients of the cohesion fund. So we are talking about around CAP and cohesion funds. It's more than 80% of the EU budget. We don't have too many studies yet assessing impact on EU budget from accession of Ukraine. It's probably too early to say, but I would like to quote some numbers from the study published just this spring by Brussels-based Bruegel, which I think is important also because it was written by a couple of economists, prominent economists, some of them from Central Europe. So according to the study, the net cost of Ukraine's EU membership in 7 years financial perspective would amount to 136 billion, which mean less than 20 billion euro per year. This is just 0.13 of EU GDP. This assessment obviously does not cover funds for Ukraine post-war reconstruction and recovery. This is obviously a very different discussion. So let's ask the question now: is this 166 billion euro, is it much or not so much? This is equivalent of total EU payment for all seven or eight Central European countries, and in this perspective, 2021, 2027. In the last 2 decades, Poland received from EU budget funds worth 166 billion euro, so it's around 8 billion euro per year. According to this very interesting Bruegel study, Ukraine being the EU member would also mean, this is very important, just very small reduction of net payment for Central European countries. And again, the last data from the Bruegel study in regards to the net payers, they would need to contribute, I'm talking about the most richest countries of the EU, they would need to contribute to the EU budget 0.1% of their GDP more that they are paying now. And the very last point, which I think is probably the most important in what I'm saying now, this is the attitude from the European Union societies towards Ukraine accession, and not only Ukraine accession, also Western Balkans and Moldova and Georgia accession. I believe that there is an urgent need for changing the EU society's approach toward the financial dimension of their country's membership, because we have like two narratives. From Central European governments, there is a widespread belief in the societies that membership in the EU is about funds. Yes, the funds we are still getting from the EU. And when we are talking about the EU 15, so the so-called old members, there is also belief that they are paying too much. So they use also about money. Obviously, they use not only about money. They use as our beneficiary from being a member of a common market. That this is a boost for not only economies from the Central European countries, but also boost for German or French economies. This is Schengen zone. Those are common endeavors in a time of crisis, like for example during the pandemic time, and now when we have float in Central Europe, Austria and Germany. So in this regards, the EU is also very helpful. So to sum up, we need an honest discussion inside the EU about cost, but also mostly benefits of Ukraine accession to the EU. And last but not least, I think that we should also, in honest way, explain to the societies that the EU is, as it was constructed at the beginning, is a value-based project. And this, if you want, a mission, yes? So without Ukraine, it's my belief, but I'm sure it's not only my belief, that the EU construction without Ukraine will not be completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Sorin, please, floor is yours. Your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Since we are chronically in shortage of time, I will start from the question of how much does it cost? And my short answer is we have no clue. In Brussels as well, or primarily in Brussels, because there are a lot of known unknowns, like the needed reform of the common agricultural policy in order to have EU 35, which means in 10 years from now, 2035, to have an EU with 35 members, including Ukraine, Moldova, and the Western Balkans. And it is pretty obvious that you need to change the rules of the game in order to have such an Euro possible. Now, the longest version of my answer to this is that we know some things, and there are estimates that circulate. Wojciech mentioned some. There are some confidential papers that circulated inside the European Council. In a democracy, confidential papers have the role to be leaked, actually, and they go to us, and they go to you. And we have these estimates that the EU 35 will mean an increase of population of about 15%, not much in the terms of GDP because these places are poorer, but on the current rules of structural funds, and especially common agricultural policy, it would mean an increase of the budget of 25%. So the iconic 1% of the GDP of the area, which is the core budget of the European Union, will have to be increased by 1/4. Now, anybody who is familiar with the politics today in Europe knows that this is not politically possible. So there had to be adjustments to the rules of the game. And it is clear the common agricultural policy cannot continue on the current rules. It's been in discussion for decades. It is a question whether the common agricultural policy of today is a source of competitiveness of Europe, of uncompetitiveness of Europe. And I saw how smartly it was avoided in many, many reports, including in the Draghi report. It's been decades ago when it was created, it was a price support mechanism, and it worked. It means that it protected the European farmers from price fluctuations, and it created a market which is highly protected against the rest of the world. Do we want to continue with this? Is it possible to continue with this? To feed up 1/3 of the budget of the EU to 3% of the population of the EU, the farmers, an incredibly powerful lobby, which are solidly middle class today, so it's not an anti-poverty policy. And can you compare such farmers from Western Europe to the farmers of Ukraine and apply the same policies? Obviously not. How it will change is an unknown, because there will be national policies, this lobby will work in many countries, and we don't know in what direction seems to be. But the best illustration of the paradox of this policy was last summer in the so-called grain crisis, you know, Ukrainian grain crisis, when they started to ship grains through Poland, through Slovakia, through Romania, and there were protests at the border, you know. But nobody, during the months of reporting, and a lot of fake news around the real problem, nobody in the media, at least in my country, Romania, asked the obvious question: how come that a ton of cereals from Ukraine brought to Romania, to the harbor of Constanța in a roundabout way 1,000 kilometers by truck, passing through borders, days of delay, is in the harbor of Constanța still cheaper than the same ton of grains brought from 50 kilometers away inside Romania to the harbor of Constanța? Why? Why is this? Is this a sustainable policy? Is it due to the common agricultural policy? Is this a more complex reality going on there? So we should start from here, actually, because in 10 years from now, this reality cannot change. Energy. Again, a core policy of the EU today, the green agenda. We started with big ambitions. Now we are making a little bit of steps back. We'll have to see how the agenda will change. If we learn one thing from Ukraine in these years of war, is how important it is to rethink the energy production, to decentralize it, to have networking, to have decentralized production, especially on electricity. And we have to look back into the EU and ask ourselves, is that an integrated market? Do we really have a European Transelectrica, which means a common market, not with the powerful nation regulators of today, where you can trade electricity freely and adjust and build resilience through redundancy sometimes? Look how difficult it is today to trade energy even between France and Spain. Look at the big price differentials between the EU member states, and let's ask ourselves, what can we learn from Ukraine actually, and in what way the integration of Ukraine and the other countries can be an impetus to finalize reforms which we should have finalized in the EU years or decades ago, and these unfinished discussions, you know, were postponed because it's really politically painful to reform Europe from inside. And I can just mention one more thing, which is rule of law, anti-corruption, money laundering. EU is a space of rules, actually. But we needed this war in Ukraine, and when we started to apply sanctions to Russian oligarchs or to people from around Putin, we realized how hard it is to do it. And suddenly, we saw in broad daylight what we knew it existed, which is a whole ecosystem of consultants, bankers, real estate agents in the big capitals of Europe, in many places in Europe, in many EU member states, who are there serving interest of dirty money from outside the European Union, not necessarily just from Russia, But from other authoritarian places with murderous leaders actually who steal from their own people and put money in safety in the European Union and create jobs, very well paid jobs. And some steps were made with the anti-money laundering directives, some offshores were closed or reduced. But again, still today, when we need to apply sanctions to individuals, we see how difficult it is. Real estate property, how powerful they are to hire lawyers actually to create slap court cases against journalists and then just to silence people, you know. And I think it's still an unfinished agenda in the EU. And we should ask ourselves, because it's not based just on values, it's based on cold interest of many vested interest in people actually inside the EU. Are we going, I mean, where is this opposition coming from against having more strict rules actually? Are we going to ruin Cyprus? Are we going to ruin the London real estate market? Are we going, I don't know, is something to happen in Sardinia or on the Côte d'Azur if some mayors, some regional presidents are going to protest? They are actually, because they know that this ecosystem creates value inside the European, but at huge cost elsewhere. So to finish, my point is that we don't know the costs, but I hope that the integration of the new wave, the EU 35, will be an impetus actually to finish these reforms inside that we needed. We needed them. It's hard time to implement them even without a new wave of expansion, but expansion is necessary. And hopefully this will be an occasion to rethink a lot of things inside the European Union beside the narrow understanding of the cost for the budget. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And last but not least, Alexandra, floor is yours, your 5 minutes. And we'll have then discussion after that.
Thank you so much. Actually, I am just applauding to Sorin because you picked up several issues that I wanted to raise, but it's much better to hear this from you, member. I mean, like representative of EU member states that from Ukraine. One of the points is about common agricultural policy. It was debated, I mean, like for years already, and everybody knows that it's inefficient, but because, I mean, like it's really important for some percentage of farmers, I mean, like it's really difficult to implement such reform. But actually, again, I mean, like grain crisis showed that it's inefficient. And I understand the difference between our agricultural, because I mean, like we have big holdings and you have farmers, but it's still not the case, I mean, like not to reform, I mean, like expensive support system, which is not efficient. And actually, Ukraine, I mean, like has experience to do such reforms, I mean, like difficult ones, when some, I mean, like privileges and subsidies are cut. So, I mean, like we have learned by doing as well, I mean, like just to show, I mean, like how it's difficult, but it can be still done. As it was said, costs, I mean, like it's really difficult to estimate the costs. But these costs actually bring opportunities, and that's what I would like to talk about more now. And this is opportunities, I mean, like for governments, I mean, like for European Union, it's much better to have real, I mean, like secure and more stable and prosperous Ukraine on the border than, I mean, like, as it was said, the most poor country, I mean, like in European Union, but I think still Moldova is still poorer. But, and in order to do this, Ukraine actually has a homework to do. And Ukraine has started already doing this homework, and we have done lots of reforms in the EU agenda as well, and we are approaching more. So everybody know about like how much we have on the table to do reforms. And here, all these reforms will be about prosperity, it will be about stable economic situation, it will be about business opportunities. And actually, we talk here about ACA, or actually ACA. We talk about TBT reform, we talk about phytosanitary issue. I mean, look, these are all difficult reforms for Ukraine, but they create opportunities not only for Ukrainian business to go abroad and to start trading with the European Union, but also it creates opportunities for European countries to bring business here. Okay, I understand that we have full-scale invasion now, we have full-scale war, but we really hope everybody that we will win the war. And so there will be more opportunities for business from European Union to transfer their business from China, from other countries to Ukraine, to create jobs, to have this narrower, basically shorter logistics framework, to have better opportunities here. And actually, this is kind of what is important now. We will have reconstruction and recovery. It's again opportunities for the business, like for European Union business to start working in Ukraine. And I think that still time is already now, like to start thinking about coming to Ukraine and not wait until we win the war. And when we talk about these opportunities, it's also, like we talk about agriculture, but we also talk about food processing. So like we all know that Ukraine exports a lot of raw materials. And we really want, like more to be produced in Ukraine. That's why some reforms, like technical regulation standards, etc. And actually, this ACA is important for Ukraine, so that business from European Union can come here to start working with according to the standards which are already used in the European Union, and that's why the government pushes these reforms and business supports them, and experts as we do, we also support these reforms. This is IT sector. It's developing nicely now, and I think it's kind of has more opportunities to develop in the future, and these are opportunities again for European business to come to Ukraine to work. This again, reconstruction and recovery, and we will have lots of opportunities here. According to the estimates of the World Bank, there will be like the need for more than 400 billion dollars, like for recovery and reconstruction. And this is kind of what is important is that when we talk about cost of enlargement, we cannot forget about cost of recovery, and cost of recovery will be still there. And therefore, I think this cost of recovery will outweigh the cost of basically enlargement, and that's what we have to remember. And that's why it is really essential now that European countries actually help us to win the war already, because Olaf Scholz already in 2022, and then like he repeated this in Berlin this year, said that the longer the war is, the bigger the cost of recovery is. And therefore, actually, this is the same about the cost of enlargement. So like the longer the war is, the higher will be the cost of recovery. And that's where we talk about, again, that we need more defense support, we need more financial support in order to win the war. And so actually, like we still come to the point that we still have to win the war. During this time, we have to do reforms, and this is kind of a challenge that none other country faced actually before. And also, what we really need is just learning by doing, like how other countries did. I remember 2009 when we were really surprised when Poland Polish economy didn't fall down, like during this world economic crisis. And the reason was that Poland did really good in using funds from structural funds. And that's what we have to learn also, like how to use these funds, what should be the priorities, and where we should kind of apply the funds, because there are many different opportunities there. We have to talk about logistics as well. This is another area of actually cooperation between our countries and especially neighboring countries. We have to invest more in railways, we have to invest more in roads, and this is kind of something that not only Ukraine will benefit, but also like our neighboring countries. And that's actually, again, about opportunities. So we are not kind of, yes, probably we will receive more, and actually not probably, but like really likely from cohesion fund, but actually, like we will have more from other structural funds, but also we will create opportunities for people, like who live nearby in other countries, for businesses. And I think this kind of private interest should be something that should be also debated and communicated in European countries. Not like only, like to talk to population, because like which has this myth that it will be expensive, they will lose some money, they will become poorer or something like that. But this is kind of about business opportunities, about kind of what the business can receive from Ukraine and how it should be incorporated is really important. And the last point here, when we talk about business, is that I really believe that currently now there is a time like for investment as well. And that's where we come to the point of this war risk insurance, and that it should be actually allowed to be used not only, for example, for Polish companies or for German companies, etc., but also for joint ventures. Because we have already good business here, and our business showed that during this full-scale invasion that it's resilient, it is adaptive, and it knows how things are done here. So like, I think that joint ventures will be really something like which is to be done, but the government really has to do its job in implementing all the necessary reforms in order that so that business feels really good here.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers for being really disciplined. This gives us 15 minutes for the discussion. Great. So please raise your hands to signal that you have questions or comments. please be as concise as possible, as quick as possible to formulate your ideas, and if possible also to concretely say your question to address to whom. Ivana, please.
Thank you, and I was very pleased to hear from our European colleagues that you are aware of the fact that you would have to rethink the common agricultural policy. And I think that the need to do that has to be not coming from the very thinking about enlargement. And how to change, so my question is, how to change the tide of that discussion so that this need comes not because of the threat, quote and unquote, of Ukrainian agriculture, but it comes from the very understanding that the competitiveness of today's common agricultural policy is not enough.
Let's collect questions if there are more questions. Gustav.
Thank you very much. So the EU is not alone on the planet, and the costs and benefits of integration and enlargement, they of course differ depending on how integrated or non-integrated the rest of the global economy is. And in the global economy, you actually see a kind of retraction of what we used to call globalization. We see increased tariff barriers, we see regulatory ecosystems that are created rather in parallel and that are, for geoeconomic reasons, sort of purposefully built in parallel. And if this trend continues, which we all expect, how would you assess this affects the cost-benefit calculation for the EU as a common market to enlarge? To my primitive understanding, but I'm a military guy, it should actually increase the benefits, but I would love to have a proper educated opinion on that.
Great. Any other hand? No? Pavel, please. And this will be this will be the last question for this round. Hopefully we'll have some more time.
Thank you, Dima. Pavel Havlicek from AMO. I want to go back to you, Wojtek, what you mentioned about the narrative about the EU budget and our countries from Central Eastern Europe basically being the recipients of that. What can we do about this when speaking to our societies? We touched upon that during the previous discussion, but still I'm sort of scratching my head about how to approach this, because if you, for the last 15 years, at least in the Czech Republic, that was the case, built your narrative about the EU, this is how we get money, how do you get out of this? Thank you.
Great, 3 very easy questions. So please, who is willing to answer at least some of them? Pardon? Okay, Arturo, Robert, yeah.
If I want, I try to reply to my colleague Gustav. No, I totally agree with you, Gustav, because agriculture is security. No, in the world we are living, in the international system we are experiencing, in a world in which every kind of resources, from energy to critical materials to food, could be potentially weaponized by our enemy, by our rivals, by every kind of action by another country. For the EU, having Ukraine inside as one of the major global producers in agriculture sector should be considered a plus, not a minus. No, the EU, I think, has to gain a lot from the Ukraine entry, also from this point of view. I don't want to mention the military sector. Gustav, you know better than me. We know the capacity Kiev acquired in these 2 years and a half on this point of view, but agriculture is another sector we have to gain a lot. So we talk a lot about European autonomy, no? This mantra of the European autonomy, and it will be a step forward to this European autonomy. So I think that is very, very clear.
Thank you. Robert?
Maybe 3 short replies to the 3 questions. First on Ivana on, I mean, I'm not an agriculture economist, but I don't think that you find many agriculture economists all over Europe or the world who are kind of positive on the common agriculture policy. Because subsidies, on the one hand, for a very selected group of people, automatically mean a burden on the rest of the economy. What you give on the one hand, you have to tax from another side. And you are putting a burden on all the other sectors of the economy, right? At the expense of agriculture. And that obviously is not beneficial, especially for those sectors which actually should be our engines of growth. So I'm not really confident that this kind of discussion is yielding to some results in terms of reforming the agriculture policy. I think it needs these kind of, make and break moments when suddenly someone is knocking at the door who has 20% of EU's agriculture area, wants to join the club, and actually probably doesn't even need subsidies, right? I mean, I think Ukraine's agriculture sector is so competitive, that's actually the explanation for your example, that if they would just get market access, I think they could do very well without the money. But of course, if the money is on the table, you take it. But that's why I'm saying, I guess this will be really the moment where we have to hope, from an economic point of view, that something will change. Yeah, I don't think that this change will come from its own, because these arguments have been around for, I don't know, as long as a CAP is around. That's the first thing. The second thing on Gustav's question, yeah, I also think that the world is kind of a little bit disconnecting or falling into blocks. This is still a process where we don't know, will it continue, what will be a kind of equilibrium between the different blocks. But yeah, I would also say Ukraine and all the other candidate countries, they will eventually help us to be more competitive. They bring in, not just in agriculture, but also in tech, in defense probably, many dynamic enterprises which will follow our rules, because that's the idea, right? They're joining our set of institutions and rules, and not the others. And the last question on the story, especially in the new EU members, on moving from a net beneficiary to a net payer. Okay, as a German, hard to say. We have been always, I think, traditionally net payer. We never said we want our money back. Obviously, there are also political limits, but I think the key story you have to tell your population is, when you started joining the EU, I mean, you were also a low-income country, right? And the EU helped you really to become richer. And I think there is really a clear causal relationship between being a EU member, getting money, but also getting the rule of law, getting the institutions up, and seeing it in your pockets over time. And I mean, I've been to Poland in the 90s and now, and I see the difference. And I do think it has to do with the EU, and I do think in all the other countries it's similar. And then it takes some sort of, convincing your taxpayer, your voters, that now you have to at some point also give something back to others who are now in the queue, like Ukraine, and have a right to experience the same positive development. I think that's the story in a nutshell, but I agree it's it's not easy to tell, probably.
Try to combine your Ivana question and Pavel's question. Definitely, without the future accession of Ukraine and other country, European Union will have to change domestically. We know that we face many problems and challenges, and I would say that we, taking into account the recent Draghi report, that we are able to formulate diagnosis of our domestic problems and weakness, but the problem are solutions. So, there are constant discussions, never-ending discussions about the solutions, and I think this is the most tricky, the most difficult thing, to find those solutions in the club of 27. I think that we should not change the treaties. It will be like a nightmare to open the treaties, but definitely common agricultural policy and many other dimensions of the EU would have to be reformed without the accession. Your Pavel's question, I think that we need a change from a political narrative from the politicians, especially, not only Central Europe, but especially Central Europe. The impact of being a member of the EU, if you take the state of Polish or Romanian economy 20 years ago, and today, this is the best advertisement of the European integration. We don't need any other. Polish GDP in 2024 was around 200 billion euro. Today is more than 800, yes, so 4 times bigger. We should prepare ourselves, we in Poland, you in Czech Republic, you in Romania, that we will become rather sooner than later a net payers. Not in the next financial perspective, but perhaps the next one, yes? So we should, our politicians, our government should change the language they're speaking to their own societies. Because what I heard as a voter is that European Union equals funds. No, this is not true. So we have to change the way we are treating the European Union. Also, if you take all the challenges, not only our uncompetitiveness as the European Union, but also the growth of the populist party. Look what's happening in eastern part of Germany. We have like almost half of the voters voted for anti-European parties, AfD and Sarah Wagenknecht party. So we have this rise of the populistic party around Iran. This is a huge challenge, also for the future accession of Ukraine. So currently 73%, according to the Eurobarometer you quoted, 73% of Poles is for accepting Ukraine as a member. And I would very much like if we will start our difficult talks with our farmers, French farmers. You know, Polish agricultural lobby is nothing if you compare it to the French agricultural lobby. So I hope that the level of the 73% would not be much lower in 2, 3, or 5 years. This is a challenge, and you know we have to teach our also politicians how to manage this challenge.
Thank you. And Sorin and Alexandra, just please be very quick, because as I understand, we need to wrap up.
I think the most important issue is the one raised by Pavel, actually. So how do we deal with the political discourse, especially in the new member states, because we are from there, after 30 years in which European Union was conceived as a place where the money comes from. In our countries, in political speaking, discourse, parties, leaders were formed around this notion, actually. And now you get to a moment when you become net contributor. We just published a report in Romania this spring, and our estimate is in a few years, at least one region, developed region, NUTS 2 region of Romania, will become net contributor. Now, this is a shock in thinking, and it's not a problem of knowledge for politicians, because they know what we know. The problem is for them to accept that and to put it out to the public, because in the words of Juncker, we'll know some things, but we don't know how to say to the public and still win elections. And that's the problem. They are not stupid. Now, we should change that. I mean, who are we? We are non-government people. I never worked in a public institution. I mean, there's a small think tank in Romania. We try to contribute to critical thinking in public and to a certain degree of common sense in the public discourse to accept these realities which are in front. What does it mean, competitiveness in Europe, in the light of the Draghi report and the additional dimensions which are not in the report? But the problem is people who are not stupid but have a stake in keeping the discourse going on in Poland, in Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, everywhere. Can we change that? We need to create a critical mass. There's no other way. And speak to our publics primarily for the moment when we have to realize that the pie is this and we have to split it between more people which are coming down the line, because extra money are not going to be there. Nobody's going to put taxes to finance the European budget and mutualization of debt. I mean, people already are ballistic in Germany, you know, when you even raise the issue of mutual debt. So we need to accept that, and our role as non-government people is to try to influence the public discourse to the extent we can. In our countries, I'm a bit skeptical because I see what is, I mean, the huge barrier in political mentality after 30 years in our region that, you know, it's Brussels, they need to give us some money, because it's what Brussels is about.
Okay,
we need to change that.
Thanks. Alexandra, your last comment.
Yeah,
and
thank
we
you.
Are done.
It seems that European Union was initially about values and about institutions, about something more than money. And now I'm hearing from member states that it's more about money, and it's perceived like this.
It's politicians.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it's still going on. And I think that I mean, like Ukrainian case, like Ukraine, we still pursue European Union, and we would like to join European Union more for values, for institutions, for democracy, for other values that we value, and actually we are fighting more, I mean, like for more than 10 years already. And this is kind of, I think, it's really important for Ukraine also. I mean, like, so our population understands that it's about values and democracy, freedom, and not more about money. Even though currently we see also, I mean, like in debates in Ukraine, that it becomes more for money. And I think that it should be also changed and communicated in Ukraine in a better way. But I think that this communication, as I hear from you member states, is really, I mean, like a problem in other countries, not only in Ukraine. And this is something that I think that we have to have this common language and common messages in EU countries and in Ukraine, because indeed, I mean, like economic theory shows that bigger number of members in the bloc will actually value the values of the bloc. And therefore, if Ukraine joins European Union, it will be valuable and beneficial for EU member states, and not only for Ukraine. And this is something that should be communicated for other countries as well.
Thank you very much. Let me thank you to the speakers. I mean, I think it was very. I think it was really great and rich discussion. My only wish is that summary of this discussion, ideally video of this discussion, will be circulated in Brussels for the next Commission, and also among the EU member states governments in the capitals, because ultimately they will be those ones who will be deciding on the reform of EU policies, which are needed not only because of enlargement, but enlargement is the impetus, and Ukraine is the impetus for these reforms. Great opportunity, great bridge to our next great speaker, please.
Hello, everyone. Let's crack on immediately. We have a VIP in the room, and it's not me, but rather a minister, probably one of the most important ministers when it comes to talking to this. Please welcome on stage Olga Stefanishina, Minister of Justice, Euro-Atlantic Integration. Hello. So the way we're going to do it is that Madame Stefanishina will have a short keynote speech, then we launch into a little Q&A when I will grill you. But I would also like to open up a little bit of time for questions from the audience as well. I know that you need to be somewhere else at 4 o'clock, so we have about...
handling it, so maybe I will have more time.
Yes, so Madam Stefanishina, let's start immediately and then we go into the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. We just briefly reflected with the Madam Director of the New Europe Center with the land that it's already a third accession forum which we conduct while the war continues to rage on across our territory, and it's very important that every year we mark a new very important stage of decisions taken in that regard. And probably for me it's very important to understand that we had a very vibrant civil society born or reborn after the Revolution of Dignity, and this has been the major driver and the watchdog of every transformation in our country. And long before the Accession Forum has been started, there was an association forum, and it has been building a strong ties between all the other countries of Eastern Europe who were in this process, but we would never be ambitious enough to imagine ourselves being a country leading behind the old enlargement and a country which has revived the enlargement policy as the new priority of European Union as such. This is something nobody would be able to dream of. So it's a great pleasure to have this discussion, and I'm just heading over from Brussels, where we have formally launched the accession process with the first meeting of delegations on the rule of law and human rights issues. And I'm extremely proud to lead the delegation of more than 300 officials from all the branches of power who have been working for 3 days in Brussels, and I already have a very positive feedbacks, which I will immediately transfer to Washington, where we will be working over the next weeks on the sidelines of the General Assembly meeting. So the process is running full speed. And I think the major driver of this process is Ukraine itself, as there is a combination of two major factors. We have been enormously proud of our country as a country which remained fully functional since the beginning of the full-scale war. So we not only withstood after the beginning of the aggression, but we also remained a fully administratively functional country. Every instrument of functioning of the state has remained effective. The banking sector, the financial sector, the administrative services, everything has been there. And we, building on that, we doubled our efforts in reform agenda, and we made a decision that wartime is the best time for politicians to deliver on the reforms. And war does not leave a room for discussions on why not. There's only one discussion: how do we have to deliver on the reform agenda to make the country as much prepared to the victory and post-war recovery and its membership to NATO, EU and NATO as we can. So that gives us the energy to be the major driver behind the accession. And that's why, of course, I never stop being curious of answering the question when Ukraine will become a member of the European Union. Yes, it could happen in 10 years, but there are so many things depend on us as well. And I think that Ukraine has the capacity and the commitment on our side, but also the momentum at the level of the European Union. All the EU leaders have understood that enlargement and making European Union bigger is the source of a geopolitical strength, and Ukraine not only as the energy of democracy and freedom could expand this, but also as a huge market beyond EU borders at this moment. And our geopolitical influence in the economic dimension has been vivid since the war started, with the global food crisis and all the effects we've seen with the blockade of ports and the restrictions Russia has imposed because of the war. So there is a source of strength and geopolitical influence which is produced by Ukraine's way to enlargement. Of course, we are looking forward to hear the same narrative from the newly formed European Commission. I was extremely happy to see many familiar faces in the Commission, people who have a strong political capital and strong backing of the member states and a strong understanding of Ukrainian file. And I'm really looking forward for the discussion in European Parliament, but also we're waiting for President von der Leyen to visit Ukraine soon. And I think that there will be much more to hear over the next weeks.
Madam, you mentioned that you were in Brussels, where you had a very successful, I heard, screening meeting. Does that mean that you are 100% confident now that you will actually open a cluster during the Polish presidency next year?
The short answer is yes.
Why?
Because it's, of course, Polish presidency is the timeline. We're speaking about the first part of 2025. And I think that the power of democracy, that there could be sort of political issues and statements, but the strong stand of President von der Leyen, as I can hear from her, and I'm sure I will hear tomorrow, is that this is a merit-based approach. And it's very hard to put a question mark behind the transformations and a commitment of Ukrainian side. So it's already around 1,000 people on the Commission side working on the accession process, and a solid majority of EU member states understanding that the momentum is there. And the moment any member states will try to backlash Ukraine's progress, this will undermine all the momentum of enlargement. So I think the responsibility is very serious here. And I can be confident on my side that we'll deliver on our commitments. And I'm confident that we will be assessed based on the independent analysis and assessment of European Commission. So and we hope that the Polish presidency and then Danish presidency would really understand that the decisions on opening this or that areas of the accession is the source of the strengths, but not the source of the manipulation.
You mentioned Madame von der Leyen, and she said something quite interesting, I thought, a few days ago, gradual integration. Now, for me, that is a bit of a red flag, because for me, that means everything but institutions. How do you see gradual integration from a Ukrainian perspective?
Or institutions and then everything.
So you would
so I'm a chief negotiator.
So you would vote on things that you have no influence over. How's that?
Our starting point would take it all, right? But we have already agreed on sort of a standardized operational procedures in the beginning of every accession meeting or accession negotiations. We get two questions. Whether we accept the scope of a key proposed for implementation, and second question is that whether we require accelerated integration. So meaning that the classic accession process provides that you do the job, you complete all the accession process, and then you do the deal, becoming member of EU, and then you get all these benefits. So our process moves in a way that we do things in parallel. So, for example, in the rule of law, we have a very simple answer saying that we will have a roadmap and we will work on the timelines together, right? The next meeting would be, for example, in the area of transport policy. So, and we would require this accelerated integration, meaning that it is not something that is offered instead of membership. This is something we get throughout the accession process. So I take it very, very positively, but we also do not have to forget at every moment of our discussion that as the bureaucracy, as the administration and the government, we have to do everything possible, but there is a specific historical dimension of Ukraine's membership to EU because it's part of the peace formula and let's say settling up the peace back to Europe, and this is our understanding, so we always keep it in mind.
You mentioned there's a lot of old faces in the European Commission, but there is a new one that will be dealing with you, Marta Kos, Slovenian. Are you happy with that appointment? Given her comments on Russia, among other things, back in 2022, and given that her country, Slovenia, obviously in the enlargement process, tried to shoehorn Bosnia into discussion as well. So have you spoken to her? What do you think of it? Of course, she's not confirmed yet, but...
Well, first of all, I'm really happy to see a perfect gender balance in the European Commission. That's important.
It's not perfect, though, is it?
Yeah.
It's actually worse than last time.
Yeah, but that's still good.
Yeah.
That's still, there was a balance in the choice. At least there was always a choice. So I do not know her as a nominated commission in person, but I had a number of feedbacks, and of course I was looking for some insights, and I'm sure that basically we will build on a good relations with her, and I'm sure that Commissioner Vargheli would have the experience to share.
Really?
So
what field is that?
I would put it this way: we have a. I would would put it this way. I have a long-lasting relationships with the current Commissioner for Enlargement, so I am sure that for the next Commission, this would be at least at the same level.
Yeah. Madam, I would love to keep you all for myself, but I have to open up for questions as well. I assume there are questions. We have Mr. Škikvaca over there, so please introduce yourself, and then we have Mr. Havlicek. I know you guys by name, I don't know why, but anyway, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Vanu Škikvaca, and I represent Civil Society Foundation from Georgia, Tbilisi. And it's a real pleasure to listening to you. My question is pretty much about the regional dimension. And looking at the history of the EU integration, we all see that there are two exceptions, and mainly there are regional integration. And I also remember that back in July 2021, your president was in Batumi, signed the TRIO declaration. And I was wondering, what's your perspective? Do you believe that TRIO is alive, it's in coma, or is it dead? So what's your take?
Should we take Mr. Havlicek and then Mr. Sidorenko? I know the whole room, it seems like.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jozwiak. Two questions for you, Vice Prime Minister. First, I know that your government is actually launching a process of Ukrainian NGOs getting formal opportunity to influence the process of enlargement and getting involved basically to support you on the way. So, general question, where do you see their role and how the Ukrainian organization, NGOs, can actually help you to succeed in this? And a second question, where do you see the biggest challenges now for Ukrainian enlargement portfolio and how we from Central Eastern Europe can actually help you? Thank you so much.
Do you want to answer now or should we take a third question?
Okay.
Third question?
Yeah.
Okay. Sergey, please.
I have a question regarding those questions that you get during your meetings with the Commission about whether we get all the key and so on. Do you see that it's about like different procedure for Ukraine, or it's rather because the Commission thinks that Ukraine do not comprehend a level and the scope of tests that are on our path to the accession? Thank you.
So, TRIO, NGO, and the Ukrainian, if Ukraine comprehends, what's ahead of you?
On the TRIO, the meeting you refer in Batumi, it was like an ages ago, and the whole new history is there at this particular moment. And TRIO is about the partnership and joint ownership and joint commitment and being a source of a joint strength to advance on that. And in that regard, we now have more than 3 countries. It's like all the enlargement countries. It's also Western Balkan. It's Georgia, who has been granted a candidate status. It's Moldova, and with Moldova we are going like hand in hand, both on the calendar but also on the set of the political decisions. So I mean, it's all the enlargement right now, and it's not the race, it's not the competition. It's a joint work which should be successful. And there are like bigger players, there are smaller players, there are stronger players, there are less, strong players. And for Ukraine, the rules are simple. We're gonna use every instrument which will work so that we succeed. And I think everybody understands that as long as Ukraine drives this process, the longer and more realistic the perspective for the other countries. So I would not really go into very specifics between Georgia and Moldova, because Georgia is now on a different stage. I mean, it's all in your hands to get closer with the other stage. With Moldova, we are on a daily contact because we have to synchronize ourselves at every step of the way, because we have, everything, very tight together. Thank you so much for the question on the NGOs. It's very important for us, because I do not feel personally being very much in need to regulate this process, because NGO and the think tanks have been with us since 28th of February every day. I never heard no from anybody. We have been working as one, but now accession process becomes extremely massive. So we had to establish 36 working groups as a decision of the government. We have the presidential decree setting up the delegation, and we have, you know, this bunch of analytical work to be done at every step of the way. So we want to give this perspective that NGOs and the civil society having a specific expertise could be engaged on a regular basis. So we made a call for engagement into these working groups in the specific areas. So I would encourage you to reach the web resources of the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister. You will get all the details and get the applications, right? Right? So, there's Daria in the second row on the right. So she knows how to make it work. So we have prepared sort of a criteria for organizations, but they are really flexible. It's just to narrow, you know, the scope and to get on board the best ones, those who really work and engage. Again. All the accession process is very public. So it doesn't mean that if you're not in a working group, you do not know what is going on. We were just joking between ourselves that before we headed over to Brussels, European Commission has requested a shadow report, right, on the rule of law. And in our understanding and everywhere, shadow report is not a public report. Like nobody even knows that the shadow report has been requested or even been prepared, but not in Ukraine. In Ukraine, shadow report has been not only prepared and everybody informed that there was a request for a shadow. It was published, and there was, you know, a weeks of events are taking place now around Ukraine presenting this secret shadow report, which was never supposed to be public. So I mean, it's all very open, but we want to have civil society and the expert community in a group for a daily job. So there was a question about the challenges in enlargement. Probably, Ukrainians generally and me in particular, we're not the best people to be asked about that. We have different challenges. I mean, whatever challenge we have in the enlargement process, for us it's the logistics. We have bigger things in our mind, and the real challenge is the ongoing war and our efforts to bring victory closer in timelines to our country. I think this is the master plan, and if at this particular point enlargement and Ukraine's membership to EU would be vital for that, my job is to make sure that our efforts fit for this purpose. So probably like that. On your question, Sergei, on whether we are not competent enough or it's a standard question for Ukraine. I heard it this way, as you said. This is the first question is really standard one, because this is already the second stage of the discussions, because we were presented all the scope of our obligations. We had to analyze it in every area, and ahead of every meeting, we have to announce our formal position, whether we accept, whether we need some discussions, whether we need some transitions. That's why it's really important that we have all these groups working right now. So it's a very standard question. But on the accelerated integration, this is a particular innovation we have for Ukraine, as Ukraine is not a newcomer in European process. We're already very much present into EU market. We shared a lot of joint goals in different areas like green transition and many others. So this is the question which has been inspired by Ukraine's integration, but also now being asked for over all the other enlargement countries.
Time is slipping away. Do you need to run now, or do you have time for another round of questions?
I have time now. So
yes, you do. So in order to create something of a perfect gender balance, are there any women who want to ask questions? Or no? No. Then I take the gentleman here.
First of all, thank you very much for openness and very professional approach to this topic. I have a question which is rather sensitive. I represent many business entities which are our clients. I'm from Business Now. And some of our big companies whom we provide the services in different spheres have worries whether they will survive after the accession to the EU. What are your plans regarding the consultations with big, medium, and maybe some small businesses regarding the conditions on which we will enter the EU? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The approach is the same as for civil society and the expert community. Business associations and are engaged in the working groups. So we cannot really take into account every single wish list from every bigger or smaller company, but all the big and small and medium size Ukrainian companies, they are in different associations. So I would think that associations is basically the instrument that allow to represent a unified position of the market or in a specific area. So you should really force them to work. I had a lot of meetings with different associations. They are not, burning with desire and energy to represent the interests of the companies they represent in the accession process. And my message is as simple as that this train is going to go forward, is not going to stop. There is a jump in, meaning that you will join the group and you will be into the process. Not necessarily the company itself, but also those people who have the time and the task to be into the process, understand what's going on, and based on that make up proposals, or you will stay aside. So I encourage all the companies to work with the associations and the unions that you have, to get into the groups and to start working with us hand in hand. We have already this experience over the last week. It wasn't really business oriented, but it is a successful thing that we have a formal delegation of 300 of people and more than 1,000 of people engaged for 3 months to prepare ourselves. So this gonna, in my perfect plan, is gonna work for every cluster the same way. So it's open, it's public, it's formalized through the government decision. So it's like now in your hands to raise your voice and stand up for yourself.
Madame Lindström.
Thank you. And I listened to your call, Rikard, about contributing with more female voices who are asking questions as well. So my name is Clara Lindström, and I come from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies. And I was really struck by your remark in the end, Madame, that this is key for the overarching purpose of victory. And in a way, what you said there is that the EU accession negotiations, that also has a security dimension. And that reminded me of a question from my Finnish colleague, Sinikuka, here earlier this morning, about the important narrative of not having EU accession as one strand, and then security or military issues and NATO on the other, but to really see that security is a part of the EU accession process. So what is your approach to the security aspects of EU enlargement, and how are you working to emphasize this story to other European stakeholders?
Thank you so much. I think I hear more and more, I hear from the different European capitals that European Union should demand Ukraine's membership to NATO. It's European Union should demand Ukraine's membership to NATO because it's about security. And I think this voice sounds to me louder and louder from different capitals and from different ministers. That gives me many signals, but one of the signals that Ukraine's accession to EU is real. So it's real, and it's not such a distant perspective like 8 to 10 years, because things are really happening fast. Second, even without joining European Union, Ukraine has already significantly contributed to the reform of EU. Look, we have a proposal from the President of the European Commission with 2 members of the Commission, one on defense industrial mandate, the other on defense policy, High Representative of the European Union for Security and Defense Policy. This is the portfolio which would never exist in any commission normally. But this is now part of the reality, and the reality is to continue functioning as European Union based on values, you have to be capable of defending yourself. And defending yourself meaning that European market is also a defense industrial market. And it's also a market which does not have to depend heavily on US market. So it's a sovereign European defense market, and it's just a fancy idea which nobody wanted to believe when President Macron was announcing it like 5 years ago, but now it's the reality with a whole bunch of structures of European Commission to be deliberately working in this area. And that's why we do not have to wait for a end game and the decision. Transformations are happening throughout the way, and I'm really grateful for you to raising this question. But I think the major investment Ukraine's makes into the security is every effort we take every day to confirm that we are democracy and that we are fighting for freedom. It's not taken for granted. It's not only Ukrainian armed forces who fight for sovereign Europe, it's also us politicians from government and from parliament who have to confirm that Ukrainian armed forces are standing for the values and that we do the necessary amount of decisions, that these values are enshrined deeper in our functioning state. And this is part of my new mandate as a Minister of Justice, in fact. And I think this was one of the decisions also to show the signal that it is important for a country, that the rule of law and the human rights are the backbone of our country's functioning.
Okay, I think you really have to run soon, but you know, I'm a journalist and I die for good headlines, so I will ask about timelines, because I have to. So, Madame Stefanishina, when is Ukraine a member of the EU? And I want a year now.
You know, I have the same. I also do the NATO part, and I have the same question.
You can answer NATO as well. I
Yeah,
mean, when you're a member of
can I
NATO,
answer
it's
NATO?
fine. It's perfectly fine. I'm happy with that.
If you would ask me when Ukraine will be invited to join NATO, I will give you the
Not
answer.
invitation, but membership, because it's two different things, right?
Yeah, it could happen any time. Where
No,
there's
no, no,
a
no,
will.
no, I want
Okay,
years.
no headline.
I want headlines, so years.
Years. Okay. So before 2030, definitely.
For both, or for?
Well, for both.
Yeah. And with that happy prognosis, I thank you very much. It's been illuminating.
Thank you.
Please, a big applause for Madame Stefanishina.